I'm Cassandra Washington, the CEO of Life Enhancement and Development Enterprises. And I'm so glad to be with you all this evening. We have a great live prepared for you all tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about understanding the power of covenant. And I have some awesome guests with me on this evening to lead in that discussion. I have with me tonight Pastor Kenneth Milton Sr. from Greenwood, Mississippi, the pastor of Morning Star Missionary Baptist Church, and also have with me Pastor Melvin Anderson Jr. from Severn, Maryland. He is the pastor of Disciples for Christ Ministries. I hope I said that right, Pastor Anderson. And we are just so excited to have them with us tonight to lead us in this discussion, understanding the power of covenant. As you know, this month is February. The month of February is considered Love Month. And so we just want to take the time to address relationships. Relationships are so important, and relationships are a part of our everyday life. And I think many times we are not really focused and we're not really understanding or aware of the power of agreement or the power of covenant in relationships. So we're going to get started in our discussion on tonight. And our first question, of course, is going to be geared toward to the gentleman, is to give us your definition or your understanding of what is covenant, and do you believe that it applies to all relationships? I think who would like to start? Who would like to go first? You want to go, Pastor Anderson?
I can, yes, ma'am. So the definition of covenant, I think to serve our conversation, I'll give you two definitions of covenant. One biblical and then one non-biblical. And the biblical definition of covenant from a theological perspective is an unchangeable and divinely imposed legal agreement between God and man that stipulates the conditions of their relationship. One more time, theologically speaking, it is an unchangeable, a divinely imposed legal agreement between God and man that stipulates the conditions of their relationship. And so then the non-biblical definition contains some of the same components in that it is an agreement. It is a contract, but then it is between two or more persons or two or more entities. The difference is the divinely imposed piece. So
Okay, so the difference between the two is the divine part.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. What about you, Pastor Milton?
I agree with what Pastor P said, that a covenant is an agreement by which the parties involved both agree to something in return for what the other party agrees to do. And it is a formal agreement. It can be between one or two people, or maybe two or more people. And we got to remember now, what makes the covenant different, like you talking about the worldly and the biblical side is a sacred promise, either by God or either with God or either in front of him. Mm-hmm. And that is the total difference between that. And he talked about that a contract is just a legal document covered under the law that we can opt out of. Mm-hmm. But with that covenant, you can't opt out of it because it's unchangeable. And see, and that's why we have to be careful about what we do when we talk about a covenant as far as relationship. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Relationships are fine, but if you put covenant in it, then you change the whole total meaning.
So, gentlemen, you all was given the definition of a covenant. So is there a difference between a covenant, an oath, or a vow? Is there a difference between those?
Okay. Probably. Could I go back and say something about how that covenant applies to all relationships. We know that usually relationships are horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
But now when you put covenant in front of it,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it vertical and then horizontal.
Can you expound upon that? What you mean?
Yeah.
It makes it vertical. You said makes it vertical.
Makes it vertical and then horizontal. Because see, when you put covenant in front of that relationship, then you have to include God in it.
Okay.
All right. So you have to have that right relationship with God before you can have that relationship horizontally. Mm-hmm. And that's what most of our relationships get in trouble at. We leave God out of the equation, and we just deal with the horizontal aspect with me and whoever that person or persons are, but we don't put God in it. That's where the problem comes in.
Okay. So you're saying that's what makes takes the relationship to another level.
Yes, ma'am.
When you put God, when you it becomes a covenant. When God is involved in the relationship, when you include him in the relationship. Did you want to add to that, Pastor Anderson?
Yeah, I'd just like to say this. That's the very reason I was distinguishing between the sacred covenant involving God and then the covenants involving us. Because what would happen, I love what Pastor Milton said. What happens a lot of times, it starts out as a covenant and God is included, but we forget that God is included when we determine that we want out. We want it to just be between us. And matter of fact, let me do it this way. When we marry, many of us, even though we go to a church, we haven't put God in that relationship in the beginning to see if that's the relationship that we're supposed to be in. And then when it's time to end that relationship, it's ended in the courts and God is not even included. Many we don't fast and pray. We don't ask God, can we get out? And as Mr. Milton said, if you go back biblically, God did honor what Moses said, but he does say that he still does not agree with divorce. He just honored what Moses said because what? Because our hearts were hardened. And once our hearts become hardened, that changes everything. So that's all I would like to add for now.
And so I'm thinking about what you all are saying, how when you put God in the equation, it takes the relationship to another level. Yeah. It takes it to a more sacred level.
A more sacred level and a higher level of responsibility. Because
I like that.
Once you put God in the relationship, now you are saying to the world that God is a part of your relationship, and now we endeavor to emulate God in relationships.
Awesome. I like that. Say that again. When we put God in the relationship, and we're saying that now that we're putting God in the relationship, we want to emulate God in the relationship. Awesome. Go ahead, Pastor Milton.
And because if God is not in the relationship, it's going to be hard to relate. even though you're still in the same ship, it's still going to be hard.
It's going to be hard to relate.
Yes, sir. Awesome.
Yes, sir. That is so true. So when we're talking about the sacredness of it, and that's why I wanted to have this discussion, because I don't think many times we understand exactly what we're doing when we get into relationships or any kind of relationship, marital relationship, friendship, business, partnership. We take things too lightly. So in the biblical sense, whenever there was an agreement or a sacredness, when God was making a covenant, that the Abrahamic covenant, the blood covenant, the Davidic covenant, all of those were so sacred and so important. So when you think about the seriousness of it and the way God thinks about it, he's very specific and he's serious about relationships and how they are constructed. Do you think we put the same amount of importance on our relationships? And do we see it the way God sees them?
You want to go first, Mr. Milton?
Yeah, I just want to say something about that covenant that she had said earlier, and to show you how serious the covenant was. In the Bible, they had what they call a salt covenant. And what they would do, one person would bring his salt, and the other person would bring their salt, and they would pour them into the same container and mix them up. Now, if they wanted to break that covenant, they would have to go in there and get each grain of their salt out. And you know, salt looks alike. So, I mean, it's hard.
Well,
it's impossible. It is definitely impossible. And so with our relationships and stuff, if we put God in our relationship, it's not saying that we're not going to have any problems, but it's saying that whatever problems we have, we can be able to overcome those problems. Because no matter who you are, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Pastor Anderson.
So when you start talking about God and covenants, as you watch the covenant, Mr. Milton, Pastor Milton said it earlier that the covenants are unchangeable. But what happens is when God is looking at his covenants with us, he's looking at how he has not changed in his love for us. He has not changed in his expectations of us. But what he has given us is grace. And then as he's given us grace, he's given us the new covenant that Jesus came to introduce to us. But that new covenant didn't change the parameters of covenant. The new covenant just gave us an example and gave us grace. And then what he wants to do is to look at it now, to take it from knowledge to putting it on our hearts.
Yeah.
To putting it on our hearts. So what he's showing us before we get to that is, for God so loved us, for God so loved the world, in order to help us maintain our covenant with him, he sent his only begotten son to shed his blood for us because he so loved us. What are you saying? When you enter into covenant with a person, the two should become one. If there's anything bothering the one or bothering the other, it's got to bother both in order for you to have an opportunity to maintain that covenant. So you got to get out of your head, get out of your heart to what's on your heart. And God wanted his requirements to be on our heart. In order, and that's for us to overcome the vicissitudes of the world, the manner in which the world adversely impacts our relationships, the manner in which the world tells us to go with our carnal selves. You know what? And my 87-year-old teacher said it like this: not everything that we get involved in from a relationship standpoint is sin, but it's weights.
Oh,
and the weights then become, and this is, I borrowed the weights from him, but then I begin to realize that's why God tells us in Hebrews to lay aside the weight. When you begin to entertain those things, they fracture your covenant.
All right, that was pretty deep there, Pastor Anderson. What do you think is probably one of the most important qualities or characteristics when God made covenants? One of the main things that you probably think you saw when it came to all of them, the blood, the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, and all of that. Because why? Why do you think he and sometimes we may say that's the extreme.
Now with those covenants, all those are what they call unconditional covenant. It meant that God did whatever he did. Man didn't have to do anything.
Okay.
Now we get to talk about those conditional
covenants. You can go ahead and talk about it. The conditional and unconditional.
Yeah. The unconditional covenant is whenever one person does something. In this case, it was God. God made a covenant with Noah. He said, I'm not going to destroy the world by water next time. And then he made one with Abraham and everything. He said, I'm going to make you a great nation. Not only that, but I'm going to even bless those who have the same beliefs as you do. Now, see, that was a covenant that God made with man that man didn't have anything to do with, because God said it and that settles it. Now, the other condition that they talk about is conditional. That means that both parties have something to do. And that's the difference between that unconditional covenant and that conditional covenant.
Okay. Come on, Pastor Melvin.
So I would add to that Hebrews 8, which goes back and gives Jeremiah, which also gives 2 Corinthians. The main thread with God's covenant with man is he wanted to be our God, right? Okay. And in order for him to be our God, there are behaviors that go along with showing the respect for him being our God. Okay. And that is the beginning to understand that one version says we are his workmanship. One version says we are his masterpiece. And as his masterpiece, there is a specific plan that he has for us so he can be our God. And that is, as I say, I'll say it this way too. There are grace is a gift, salvation is a gift, but life itself is a gift. And he said that he sent his son that we might have it, that we might enjoy it, and that we might have it more abundantly and or to the full. So as he's saying that, I want to give these things to you, but I cannot give them to you if you want to behave any way you want to behave.
Wow.
You want my blessings and you want to enjoy the gifts, but guess what? Even in the obedience, it's because he wants you to live your best life, your most fulfilled life. So that's why when we start to take on weights of the world and let the world determine our definitions of love, even here we go, even saying to us that man wasn't created to be monogamous and all of these things, those things become weights which lead us to sin.
Covenant in specific relationships. We have friendships, we have partnerships. Now, when I think about friendships, I think about David and Jonathan. And for me, I don't call everybody my friend. Because to me, I look at it as a covenant relationship. Friendship is not something that you should take lightly either. I don't call everybody my friend. How do you all feel about that? Friendships and partnerships, especially too in business when it comes to partnerships.
Well, now, I agree with that friendship, because sometimes in friendships, if you're not careful, one person could be considered your friend, and the other person might not consider you their friend. You might consider that person your friend, but then that person might not reciprocate the same feeling that you have. So we have to be careful about that. And then I've now had some friends of mine that I've been knowing for years and years. I call them, consider them my best friends when I was in high school. But now I consider them my best friend. We call them BFF, best friends forever.
Yeah.
But since we moved apart, that forever is no longer there. We were just best friends. And so with that friendship, we have to have make sure that we have it's based on understanding. And just like you said with Jonathan had a friendship that was very unusual because they first had a spiritual bond. And that spiritual bond started when David had killed Goliath. Then he went to live in Saul's house. And he and Jonathan, they spirit just clicked. You know, they had that old saying, try the spirit by the spirit.
Yeah.
And then he showed our sacrificial love for David, because he even dodged one of Saul's spears when he was trying to kill David.
Yeah.
So Jonathan proved the sacrificial love, for David. And then Jonathan always offered David encouragement. Even when he was down and out, he was fleeing Saul in the wilderness and everything. Jonathan went to where he was and encouraged him. So we're going to have a friendship. We need that spiritual bond, that sacrificial love. We need to make sure that we encourage them. And then Jonathan even offered him protection when his dad was looking for him. So you got 4 things that really talks about that friendship. And you have all of those, and you're in good shape. And then it talks about pain. Even when David was in pain, Jonathan was in pain also. That's just that bond and that friendship that they have. But a true friend will be able to feel the hurt when another friend is going through and be there to help them regardless of what it is. And then it's no jealousy, because even though Jonathan knew David had been called by God to be the king, and he was in line for the king, he yielded down to God's will. And it was no jealousy there. So we have all 5 or 6 of those characteristics. I think that's a good basis for a good friendship.
Yes, sir. I agree. Those were good. Come on, Pastor Anderson.
So when you opened, you said we were going to discuss 3 things. February was the month of love, so we're going to talk about love. And then you also stated that we're going to talk about relationships, and you also stated we're going to talk about covenant. So Pastor Milton did a great job, so I'm just not going to repeat what he said, but I'm going to say this. The very ground of what he said is there's 2 commandments God says. Love your neighbor as yourself, and to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and body. Let's talk about the love your neighbor as yourself. So I think what Mr. Milton just described for us is there's 3 things also: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest is love. And love, there's another word they call for love is charity. So friendship is, outside of family, is the first time you choose somebody to love. Right?
Wow.
And when you choose that somebody to love, and you understand love as God intended love as yourself. So now Mr. Milton just said it again. When you feel pain, I feel pain. But what does the Bible say? I'm eventually supposed to cast my cares upon God, for he careth for me. But there may be times when I can't, or even if I've gone down to the altar, I didn't leave it at the altar. So you have to be, as my friend, to carry my burdens with me, not for me, but with me. And then, no greater love has no man than this, that he might lay down his life for a friend. So those are the things that begin to build our character for us to be able to understand covenant and properly be able to keep covenant when we learn to love someone external to ourselves. When you look at now those who you selected as friends and look at your choices, not only do you evaluate the persons, now step back and evaluate yourself by looking at your choices. That's the way that we grow also.
Wait, come on with that. Come on a little bit more with that. Step back and look at yourself.
Look at yourself.
And look at your choices.
And your choices, then if you look at them objectively, they'll begin to help you guide your prayer life, right? Help you guide the things that you ask God to help you with along those lines. Because it's easy to evaluate someone else, but when do we introspectively look at us?
Right. When we've talked about partnerships, we talked about friendships. Now let's talk about marital relationships. You know, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was like, Cassandra, I want to know who came up with these marital vows. Who came up with these marital vows, and specifically the part that says to until death do us part, about to in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor. What are those vows based upon, and who created those vows, and what were they trying to? What do you think was the essence or the gist of those marital vows? Because we know that marriage is a covenant. And some people may look at it as a covenant, and some people don't. Because some people get out of marriages, you know, just like that with no thought. They say, "Hey, look, let me move on to the next person." So, what do you all think about that when it comes to the marital vows and marriage as a covenant?
Well, I think that I don't think marital vows are in the Bible, didn't come from the Bible, but I think they took it from certain parts of the Bible, if I'm correct. But and now one thing I noticed about those vows, when you think about it, whenever the person says, "Well, do you take this person to be your lawful wedded husband or either wedded wife? Do you would you cherish them?" You said, "What? I do." But guess what we're leaving out of the I do's?
What we leaving out?
We need to say we do, because and you need to include God in it. Because see, that's what the problem is. You think about those vows. I'll say, I do, I do, I do. We should maybe say with the help of God.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because we got I in everything that we do. But now with those vows, now I don't. Dr. P, do you know where it might have come from? Because I know it didn't really say.
I'm in agreement with you. I think they might have gotten it from portions of the Bible, but
Yeah,
I've
yes,
never
sir.
seen it. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I never.
And as I look back over things, if we are not careful, just like when we take an oath before the court, they said, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? We said, I do.
Mm-hmm.
But why not put with the help of God? Because see, we can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
We try to say, well, we're going to do this to our marriage. I'll be up through thickness and then, sickness and health, richer for poor. But can we really do that without God's help? So maybe we might need to go back and reevaluate some of the things we say.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the things we do. And that might could change some of these divorces or either some of these relationships and different things like that. But we keep leaving God out of anything. And whenever God is not in control, then everything is going to be out of control.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree with that. Come on, Pastor Anderson.
So I would have to be, as always, fully transparent. So I am one of those who has been divorced, and as a 56-year-old, have an opportunity to be called to God and look back over my life. Let me say this about the marriage covenant. It is indicative of the relationship between God and man in terms of when Jesus comes back, he's looking for a bride without spot or wrinkle, right? Mm-hmm. And as he's looking for a bride, he never changed the qualifications of the bride. As we've even been talking, the covenant, as Pastor Milton said from the very beginning, the covenants have been modified, but they haven't changed. Mm-hmm. They've added some things, but the main thing is the main thing, and God keeps the main thing the main thing. That's one thing we need to understand. The second thing, in terms of relationship, when we're choosing a partner, we haven't looked at what a godly man looks like, because I've been head of men's ministries. Most of where men got their ideas about what kind of woman they want is not from church, not from the Bible, not from God. And then thirdly, and I think probably supremely, is very rarely have we seen a good biblical marital relationship. Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Right. What over time in my life, women have stated that they stayed out of dedication, and they were dedicated, but then they realized their worth. And then when you talk about a woman's worth, for men to understand a woman's worth, Proverbs 31. Don't get down to the end and just read that part, but start at the very beginning where King Lemuel says, this oracle, this message was taught to him by his mother. Wow. And then it starts with, and as she's getting prepared to talk to him, she says three little things. Oh, son of mine, oh, son of my womb, oh, son of my vows. She is really intense on helping him. So then after the first couple statements, she tells him what a good wife looks like. And then when you look at that good wife, that woman is not no housekeeper. That woman is successful on her own.
Come on with it, Pastor P.
Look in the Proverbs and see. So again, what I'm saying is, so what I would say is, when we're choosing a spouse, it's got to be more than how fine she is. And I got to go a step further.
Come on.
It's got to be more than how fun it is in the bedroom. Right?
Okay.
And so if you're going to have the legs to make it, and then, as Mr. Milton was saying before, when I talk to the people I know that I have a sphere of influence with, very rarely again was God included, except for that last 7 days before the wedding. when it's required to get married at a specific church when you went to counseling.
Definitely.
do you hear what I'm saying? Sandra's laughing. So we got to improve that. And then we got to have a healthy regard for one another, because that's really where it is, that unconditional love, as Mr. Milton was describing, friendship. So you got to have a friendship with your wife. And then you got to have that love for God that says, I know that God wants me to be successful in my marriage, so it can't be based on do's and do nots. Mm-hmm. Man has proven that we don't do well with do's and do nots. We use them as weapons against one another.
Wow. That is the truth. That is the truth. That is the truth. That's awesome. You got something you want to add, Pastor Milton?
Yeah, and like Petey said, talk about that friendship and stuff. We also have to realize that marriage is more than that friendship, is more than that partnership. It's a binding commitment. And then we have symbols to help us bind that commitment, like rings. And then, we take those vows and everything. We exchange rings, we exchange names. So we want other people to see that we are closely connected, and that's what the marriage is all about. But then when we promise to take care of each other, protect one another, and love one another, cherish one another, for better or for worse, and like Pastor Pete said, you just can't look at that Coke bottle shape, because sooner or later it's going to turn into a 2-liter. And then we got to look at the heart. We can't look at the outer appearance, because like the word said, that this too gonna change. Mm-hmm. Cause nobody gonna look like they did when you first met them. Mm-hmm. When my wife met me, I had some hair, but I don't have any now. But thank God she didn't marry me for my hair. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But see, that's what we got to make sure, that we just don't marry for the outward looks. We got to see what they're about on the inside as well. Mm-hmm. Because the inside is going to be what you really want to marry, as opposed to the outside, because that outside is going to change.
Right. So going back to what you all said at the beginning, that a relationship becomes a covenant relationship when God comes into it, and that the covenant relationship is built upon certain things. Certain things have to be there. Now, with that being in mind, when people are coming together in a marital relationship, they're coming together to be unified and to be one. Now, when I bring Carmen into a marital relationship and I bring my resources and they bring their resources, is it not conducive for the covenant relationship for me to have a prenuptial agreement?
Now, I don't know about Pastor P now, but the way I feel, if you have to have a prenup, something is missing. So that might be a discussion that you two might need to have to see what the problem is, but you have to put all your cards out on the table. Mm-hmm. But if you have to have a prenup before you get married, but if you divorce me this way, this is my money and this and that, but then you're supposed to be one. Now, are you really one? If
that's
you have
a
to
good
have
question.
A prenup, now think about that. Now, if you have to have a prenup, something's not right somewhere. That's just the way I feel.
Okay. What do you think, Pastor Anderson?
So I would say this. I 100% agree with Pastor Milton, but I live in this very real world, right? Mm-hmm. And as we just stated, I don't think most people go through premarital counseling with their pastors. And I have been privileged to take several couples through premarital counseling. And you can see what Mr. Milton is talking about. The things become evident if you objectively look at your relationship. Yeah. And so that's where I agree with Mr. Milton. If a prenup is necessary, it's probably telling you before you get married that you shouldn't get married. But I think also what has happened in modern times, 2022, there's a fear when you are a little older and you're getting married and you've given your all to your profession and you've saved your money and you go into this relationship with this person. Most of the time, we might not say the words, but I'm going to use an old-fashioned word that we haven't even used tonight. You know that you're unequally yoked. Right? You love them, but you know you're unequally yoked. You're getting married in a church, but you haven't been able to get this person, whether it be the male or the female, to go to church with you more than 10 times, even in Zoom during the pandemic. And so if you're going to go through with that marriage, I'm saying I understand why people ask for them, but I do agree with Pastor Milton that if you have a prenup, you probably shouldn't be getting married in the first place.
Okay. So we
at least ask the question.
Yeah. So we have a comment from Tiffany Sims. Now she said when she and her husband got married, neither one of them had anything. What they built it together. They've been together. They were 22 years old and 23 years old when they got married. She says, but she feels like it could cause doubt and insecurities in the beginning. But she was saying being equally yoked is very important. So if she says she feels like it could create a foundation in the marriage where there's insecurities and doubt in the marriage.
Yes, ma'am. And also trust as well, because if a person has to sign that, it makes you wonder. I mean, do you really love me or do you really trust me? It has to be a problem somewhere. And that's just not going to go away.
And I got one more.
It's gonna linger throughout the whole marriage, because that thought gonna always be behind that. Well, I wonder why did she or he want me to sign that prenup? It gotta be something. And that's like Pastor P said, you have to go through counseling, and then you have to be honest and lay all your cards out on the table. So you won't be getting caught off guard or this snuck up on anybody. If you lay all your cards out there, talk about the prenup, you bring it up in the marriage counseling and try to work it out before you even get married. But if you start with nothing and you work to build something, that's different. But if you come in, one person doesn't have that much and you have everything, then it might be a little problem there.
You want to add, Pastor Anderson?
Just one point to consider. A lot of times with regard to prenup, it's the business advisor, it's the lawyer, it's the mother, it's the father, somebody suggesting that you protect yourself, whether it be the male or the female, by doing the prenup. So now what I would say, you already got third parties in your relationship that have influence in your relationship. That's problematic as well. And that goes back to what Pastor Milton said with the trust. But then let's just go one step further. I'm not in that situation. But if I'm a multi-millionaire athlete or entertainer and I'm about to get married, see, but that's a problem too, because I'm going to say this probably is not going to be taken very well. What I've seen with men is you won't marry someone on your level. You marry someone that you can control and manipulate.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Right? So if you started dating on your level, that conversation would be very different when you go talking about a prenup. Because now she's telling you, N-word, I want you to sign one too.
That's it.
That is an excellent point. On your level. Then if you marry somebody on your level, then that won't even be that probably won't even be an issue.
Yeah.
Probably won't even be an issue. But you said men have a tendency to choose somebody that they can manipulate and control. Now you all are hearing this from the mouth of a man.
Yeah. And I think they probably call them trophy wives.
Tiffany said yes. Well, so
even when I was in the military, a lot of military bases are in small towns, and there's still not a lot of opportunity. So you got a man who has a certain rank and certain money coming in. So now, instead of dating a woman that is equal to him, he goes to those small towns and he tries to find, as Mr. Milton said, the most attractive woman in the small town and get 2 or 3 of them because they are wanting to get out of the small town. Mm-hmm. They're wanting to be involved with a man who is going somewhere. So you, in your career is not over. So it happens at every level. That's why I said, don't I used to always tell my partners, don't brag to me that you got 10 women. I want to know which one is on your level. Mm-hmm. So you can't brag to me that you're the man in your relationship when you are carrying something over the person you're in relationship with.
When they have no one who really challenged them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I call that a fake player.
You call him a fake player?
A fake player.
So with that being said, you have these issues. A person that has gotten into the relationship, has gotten married. Can a covenant be become void?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let Mr. Milton give you the better answer, but can I respond to that first this time?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think in many times the covenant becomes void right after the honeymoon. And I'll say, and I'll give you another example using the military. Not that first one I gave, but there's a lot of time when you have a male or female who's senior to someone and they marry a junior person, and that junior person is enamored with that senior person, but curry 3 to 5 years down the road, and that junior person is where that senior person is, and now they're looking at them differently.
Yeah.
Now that realized they were not equally yoked, and then that relationship, that covenant is broken. And we break, and we know that we break our covenant with God all the time. Our covenant with God, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's either or. God doesn't like lukewarmness. You're either obeying the covenant or you're rejecting the covenant. Mm-hmm. Right. Overarchingly. So in our covenants that we make with one another, we said at the beginning, Mr. Milton said relationships are horizontal, but they become vertical and become sacred when you let God involved. Mm-hmm. Man, they tear down that vertical so they can deal just in the horizontal. Go ahead, sir.
And you know what, too, Pastor P? Now I like what you said there, because we tear it down. God doesn't tear it down, and we have to remember that with the covenant that can become void, that's going to be that conditional covenant. Mm-hmm. Because an unconditional covenant, that means it can't become void, because that's what God said. But with the covenant that we have, when one person violates or breaks the covenant, then it becomes void. Mm-hmm. All right, but now we have to realize that obedience is required on every individual that is involved in that covenant. Okay, a good example, when God made that covenant with Samson, he said Samson, he knew Samson was going to need strength to do what God wanted him to do. He said, now Samson, now as long as you don't cut your hair, you would be, your strength will stay with you. But Samson fooled around and told his secret. Mm-hmm. And y'all know the rest of the story.
Right.
He cut his hair, he lost his power and everything. And also, even with Laban and Jacob.
Oh, I was going to bring that up. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jacob and Laban, when Jacob had made that covenant with Laban, he said, "Oh, I love Rachel. I want to marry her." He said, "You work for me 7 years, and I'll give it to you." But he broke the covenant because tradition said that you had to marry the older daughter off first. Mm-hmm. So when Jacob went in and laid down, he thought it was Rachel, but it was Leah, and Leah was a little puny-eyed. Mm-hmm. So then, after he had broken that covenant, then they made another covenant. Laban said, well, hey, you work for me another 14 years, then you can have Rachel. But then during that time, Laban kept on doing some strange things to Jacob. And then God finally told him, he said, hey, Laban, Jacob, you're going to have to go. And then they made an agreement that said, Jacob, you can have all the speckle covered sheep and blah this and blah that. And one day he woke up, Jacob was gone. And then they came, after Laban had found out Jacob had left, he pursued Jacob. And once he caught up with him, then they made a covenant. That's when they said, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent, one from another. Now they made an agreement to live at peace with each other. Even though they weren't there around each other, they did make that covenant with God. Even though I can't see you, God can still see you. That's where they made that covenant from.
Awesome. Come on, Pastor Anderson.
So picking up on that. So when Laban did what he did, now there is a covenant now that exists between Jacob and Leah and Jacob and Rachel. And now what happens in that unbalanced covenant, the sisters become competitive with each other for Jacob's love and attention.
Now,
as they become competitive with one another for Jacob's love and attention, one can have children, and one took a long time to have children. And out of the union, just to be short and brief, out of the union of all the children and one girl, three things happen. The children have a poor relationship based on the way their mothers are treated. And they sell their baby brother into slavery. They're not watching or interacting with their sister, so she leaves and goes to have some fun, and she gets raped by a guy who wants to marry her. So what I'm saying, when it comes to covenant is impacted by family dynamics.
Yes.
Go on, Pastor. Y'all talking about this thing. Now, see, you know, while you all were talking now, that made me go back to that when you say we get into weights. We get into weights. All of those things came about because of the way things were handled. Issues that didn't necessarily have to be there. Issues that didn't necessarily have to be there. And when all these issues do arise, then we do want to flee. We want out. We want to get out. You know, and so what you all have given some great insight about this, and which is what I wanted. I wanted us to be able to take a look, really think about, become aware of what we're doing, even in our day-to-day interaction with one another. And when we do decide to get involved in relationships, how we handle our relationships, how we view them, what the perspective that we have. Because I think when we have an awareness and understanding, that behavior that you talked about earlier, we will behave differently. Go ahead. You want to say something, Pastor Milton?
No, go ahead. I'm listening to what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying some things that you all have, points that you all have made, because I want to bring it out and for us to think about. Go ahead. Yeah.
And who do we really blame for the weight? What Pastor P was talking about. Who do we blame for the weight? We don't blame ourselves.
No, we blame the other person.
And God. God, you know, you gave me this person. You understand? We blame everybody but ourselves.
You just said that. Isn't that what Adam said about Eve?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're right, sir.
Yes, sir. We always put the blame on the other person.
I would like to add this for you, if you see how you guys feel about this. So I just concluded a long study of Matthew. And although we know that the things that happened to Jesus, he knew they were going to happen. But they did not have to happen if relationships and love and covenant were straight.
Yes, sir.
They didn't have to happen. And then if friendships were straight, somebody that's a member of the Pharisees, and somebody that's a member of the Sanhedrin, and somebody that's a member of the scribes, and somebody that's a friend of the high priest should have said it's wrong to manipulate the crowd.
Yes, sir.
Because we want to maintain our status.
Yeah.
We want to maintain the relationships with our positions.
Yes, sir.
So we reject the very one we were waiting to see.
Yes, Lord.
Because we cannot see him or recognize him.
And you know what? And that's good too, Pastor P. And the same thing happened with Judas. Now, look, it was a reason that Judas was trying to keep the money, because he was trying to prove to Jesus that he was good with money. So whenever Jesus came into his kingdom, he would have a position. See now, but Judas realized that, hey, well, this man ain't who I thought he was, or who I thought he was going to be, because Jesus came in and did something just totally different. He didn't come in on a horse, defeating the Romans, and he came in humble. And that's what messed Judas up, because Judas said, hey, well, maybe he might not be the one. So Judas started doing all kinds of stuff, trying to prove that he was good with money, but messed himself up. And he could have at any time asked Jesus to forgive him, but he was so hung up on self. He was so hung up on that money. He was so hung up on what he was trying to get out of that he lost focus on God. And when even in our relationship, even in our marriages and stuff, if we lose focus on that vertical relationship, then everything else is going to fail.
I like the way you said it. If you look at it, if you put your hand up for the vertical relationship,
yes,
and you put your hands together for us becoming one. So now if I break the vertical relationship and we got issues, we only have each other to blame.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so in these final comments that you have been making, I have just been thinking, so it behooves each individual person to evaluate yourself.
Introspection.
And I want you all to make your final comments on what I just said. Go ahead, Pastor Milton.
Oh, and you are so right, prophetess. We can see the faults in others, but we can't see the fault in ourselves. And when I preached about David today, I came from over there, 2 Samuel 12, and it said Nathan told David, he said, "Thou art the man." And seeing what we have to do instead of looking at everybody else. Maybe we need to get some hat on with some glasses on each side, and every now and then just take a look to your left and look at yourself instead of looking at everybody else, and stop blaming everybody else, because we are responsible for whatever we do. So we have to take a look at ourselves, even when we go to church. Start looking at yourself when the preacher preaching the word. Look at yourself. Because that's where the real problem lies. It's you and it's not nobody else.
Exactly. Come on, Pastor Anderson.
The Bible says that God has given us everything we need to live a holy life. Paraphrase. Then he also said in 2 Thessalonians that he will also give you the power to do everything you can think of for the kingdom. God. So when you look at your life, and you are his workmanship, you are his masterpiece. So look at your life and ask yourself, am I behaving like his masterpiece or a world masterpiece? Whose masterpiece am I? And if he's given me, now this I can't take credit for. This is my cousin Vanessa's husband. If God has given a man one of his daughters, if you can't sit down and have a conversation and imagine Jesus asking you, how are you treating his daughter? And you can't give Jesus an answer that will please Jesus, you need to correct your steps.